actually took a few notes because I wanted to be a little more specific to it. This is the learning to ask yourself great questions. Okay? And this is in every aspect of your life, right? At work, personal. You know, as an example, I have a friend that was dating a woman, dated her for a couple of years, ends up getting married, and the marriage doesn't work out. And I'm like, yeah, well, you guys didn't like each other when you were dating. Why do you think you're going to like each other when you get married? As an example, instead of asking really good questions like, what's going to happen, right? And going from there. In the workplace or in other areas of life, there's sometimes these questions need to really be sussed out, right? Sometimes you can just stop and you can go, if I do this, what's gonna happen to my plan, right? What am I going to give up for that in order to do this, right? It's a great question as opposed to just doing it. That's kind of a simple thing, right? So when you get really hard things that you're facing, we all end up having hard things that we're facing. If you don't, just wait. It'll come to you. But it's like a 5-point process that I go through now when I've got critical things. I'm going to tell you why. It's because I learned the hard way. And the very first thing I'm going to ask is what, and I actually will go over this. And the more you do these things, the more you build a muscle to do these things, the more you're going to be able to go and say, I think I can actually go through a process without looking at the paper to do it or looking at something. But you have to do it. The first thing you have to go, what specifically am I facing? Right? And usually, or not usually, but often when we're going through these things, when we have to deal with major questions, we're emotional. All right, so we're like, oh my gosh. And that's what happened to Caliber. I'll go into that. I'll use my company as a prime example of what we should have done versus what we did. Because when I look back, I'm like, if we would have done this, this, and this, and this, we would have seen things and we would have chosen a different path. But what specifically am I facing? And you want to kind of get that emotion out of it and be as logical as possible. And that sometimes is hard, but that's what you want to do. And I usually will say, am I looking for a strategic outcome or am I looking for a tactical outcome? Because I want to know, am I trying to do something that's like very tactical, or am I doing something strategic? But I want to know, what specifically am I looking at? What's facing me? Then I want to look and say, or the thing that you're doing, it should push you to a logical need at hand and focuses on the basics. Because what happens is you need to clear out the emotions and you need to be able to look at those things that are basic and logical. Again, I'm going to give you examples of this, because when I went through this exercise on my own, I went, oh man, if I would have known this, I would have probably saved myself, I don't know, maybe $300,000 or $400,000 would have been significant. And I say me because it's my company that happened to, but it came out of somebody's. I wouldn't have been driving Uber. I'm glad I did. That was a great experience. I don't wish any of that experience was gone, but I don't want to do that again. That makes sense? And anybody who ever says that, where they're like, oh man, if I had to do it over again, I would. You didn't go through anything hard, because the last thing I want to do is go through anything like that again. Okay? The other thing is, it's going to open your mind to possibilities. And I always say, what could go right? If I do this, not what could go wrong, but what could go right? Like if I make the decision to do this, what could go right? What could go wrong? What are the potential outcomes? And it should create more questions that lead to solving the bigger, greater problem, or greater question. I shouldn't say problem, greater question. And then I always will ask myself, is my conclusion the best possible scenario? And then at the end of this, I go back and ask that first question, is my scenario that I came up with strategic and tactical? And did what I wanted, what I originally said that I wanted a strategic or tactical outcome, did that match? And if it didn't, do I need to go back and redo it? Or did I think it was actually strategic when it was tactical? But you need to like come together on that, because those things are very different. Okay, so we'll talk about. So what happened at Caliber is we said, we owe the IRS $250,000. We were supposed to have a contract coming in that didn't come in. It was a renewal. We had 8 people that were on the bench. Okay. Oh, we have debt that we incurred because of carrying those people. And well, there's debt, you know, a lot of times in business anyhow. Oh, we have a business unit that's not functioning well. Okay. And there were all these problems, right? Oh, and the big one, we didn't have the money to pay our employees. What in the world were we going to do? Emotionally, we need money to pay the IRS. We need money to pay the debt. We need, most importantly, money to pay the employees. Okay? And so we took out a hard money loan. And what did that do? That created a Band-Aid. It really didn't solve the problem. It solved the immediate pain. Oh, okay, we got money. And we became delusional again. Now, we did do a few things, like we disbanded one of the groups later that wasn't functioning. The 8 people that were on the bench, they ended up leaving, right? But some of the things, we should have done, because what we did is we made an emotional decision. It was like we were drowning and somebody threw us something. We're like, oh, great. And what we didn't realize is they threw us an anvil. It was sinking us. And before we could let go of it, realizing that was a problem, we just kept on holding on to it. So what we should have done is we should have said, what are we specifically facing? And again, it would have been like, well, we owe the IRS, we owe other people, we owe employees, we have a business unit that isn't working, and we have 8 people that contract didn't come through. And so we would have looked and said, that's what we're specifically facing, okay? Then we would have gone and said, okay, what is it we really need? What is it we really need? Well, truth is, we need to make sure that we're paying the IRS from this point on, not the things that are back. Okay? So we don't really have to pay the IRS the money back right now. So that's not really one of the issues. I mean, it is. But in this time frame, in this moment, that's not an issue. And you know what? We have people we owe money to, but they may have to wait. We have a business unit that's not functioning. We can get rid of that business unit. We have 8 people. We're going to have to let them go because we can't carry them. What's the real problem? The real problem is we don't have money to pay our employees. That's the problem. That's the need, right? So what we do is we take out this loan to cover those 5 things, but it was really only to cover 1, because none of that money went to the IRS. Very little of that money went to paying off our existing debt. it went to pay the employees. Right? So we could have looked and said, you know, and we would have said, okay, we've got this funding opportunity. What if we don't take it? What if we don't take that money? Because now we realize that what we have is the need to pay employees. What happens if we don't take that money? Well, the IRS is still going to be there because they're there. The debts to the people that we owe money to, that's still going to be there. We've already made a decision we're getting rid of that business unit, and we have to let 8 people go because we don't have work for them. What we're facing is that we don't have the money to pay our employees. So what happens if we don't take that loan? They don't get paid. Okay, that was the big problem. They don't get paid. So if we would have gone through this, we would have narrowed this down to the one big thing, and that was taking care of people. Now, then the question would have been is, what happens if we what if we just take out that loan, right? Well, if we take out that loan, it's a Band-Aid. It's going to be more pain down the road because now we have daily money being taken out of our account. Okay? They're going to tick us for like $1,000 a month or something like that until they get their money. What's that? $1,000 a day. $1,000 a month wouldn't have been bad. It would only take us about 30 years to pay that off. It's like an EIDL loan. Like $1,000 a day, right? Now, and we would have looked and said, the employees would have gotten paid, but would have had all this money we don't need, right? So we could have said, what are our options? Well, our options are to go back to our employees and say, we got to figure this out because we don't have the money to pay you. Another option would have been to say, let's go find a loan that just covers employees, just covers that basic amount. Doesn't solve our other problems, but it makes them whole for not having to, because of our mistakes. And then we would have said, well, how are we going to proceed? Now with this information, how are we going to proceed? And I think what we would have done is we would have said, hey, instead of taking out this big loan, I really have a hard time not paying employees. So let's do this. Let's go back to our employees individually, set them down and say, we have 2 options. We can either pay you interest and you don't get paid now, or we'll pay you now because we're going to take out a loan to do that, just to do that part. We could have done that. Or we may have said, we're not even going to do that. We're not going to put our employees in the position of having to choose. We're just going to get the loan because I don't want them to feel like they have to do it. But we would have been having those discussions. I believe we would have gone out and said, we're going to get a loan to cover that. We're going to do that. And it would have been significantly less money than what we did. Because what we did is we looked and we said, oh, we can get that much money. That's going to solve so many problems. And we jumped to that because it was an emotional tie. And then we would have come back and would have said, is our conclusion the best possible scenario? Under the circumstances, right? Because the best possible scenario is everybody just goes, I don't need any money. I'll work for you for free forever, Tab. But that's not going to happen. I wouldn't do that anyway. But you know what I mean? I mean, logically, the best scenario was that we would have taken out a loan that was less money. And it probably would have saved us over time maybe $300,000, just the estimate. So do you see how asking yourself great questions really starts to play out in everything in your life? So, you know, think about and think about it like this. If you're faced with something, just stop for a second and just say, let me think about this. you know? And I'm not saying you have to do that with every single thing in your life. Whoa, pizza or burgers? I'm going to step back and think about this. I'm going to go to logical. What specifically am I facing? Pizza or burger? You know, I'm not, you know what I mean? I mean, don't get silly. But a lot of things, I honestly think a lot of problems that marriages have wouldn't happen if people could sit down and stop the emotional side of it and just go, hey, let's just talk about what we're facing. You know, we have a problem with a child that's pitting us against each other. I'm making this up as I go. You know, how do we handle this? Let's go through this, because then maybe, you know, you come out the other end and you're like, I think we've got a conclusion that is our best scenario. You know, and whatever. Any questions about this?
How often do you have ego get in the way of these decisions?
That's a big problem, right? Because sometimes people are like, you know, and it happened to us, right? I was like, hey man, because when we went through this, we had our highest revenue year, right? And up to that point in time, I felt like a gunslinger. I was like, man, I'm nailing it, right? And revenue is only so valuable, right? I mean, it's like, great, you know, you're doing $50 billion a year and you're spending $51 billion a year, right? I mean, that's, so the ego part for me at that time was, I can outrun this. I always outrun it. Well, you can outrun something. Ultimately, I ended up doing a freaking like 100-mile marathon to outrun something when I could have probably done something different. So ego is big, and that's the problem, especially when you're doing multiple people, because it's like, you know, you're blaming me. You're blaming me for this problem. I know it. You know, we are where we're at, right? We are just here. No blame. We just are here and we're solving. So yeah, ego's a big issue.
So is that a moment of clarity where you realize your ego, like, it's life changing, and you say, oh, I have a big ego, or is it still?
I think it's really hard to just get rid of a big ego, because we all, you know, want to have a sense of significance, right? And so everybody wants to be significant. So if you're dealing with something and somebody's like, and you know, hey, you know it, you're not saying it, but we both know it. I'm the problem. We wouldn't have gotten into this problem, this situation, if I would have been a better CEO. So yeah, ego becomes a problem, and just having to sit there and say, look, we are where we are. We have this problem. We're past blaming. We're past pointing fingers, and we need to figure out what we're specifically facing. And it's hard because you do. I mean, you have to, because then you have moments of like, and this is the other thing is we have to be careful. Living in the past is a useless thing. You know, if you're like, you know, if you were a star quarterback and you're like, yeah, man, back in high school, 8,000 yards in one season, 50 touchdowns, yeah, that was awesome. I was really good. And if it wouldn't have been for that one hit, I'd be in the NFL Hall of Fame today. I don't know, right? But we live in the past so often, or we do this, if I wouldn't have done that, if I wouldn't have made that one colossal mistake, we dwell on it. And we should only look at the past if it can positively impact our present and our future. Otherwise, it doesn't do us any good. So we have to get out of that emotional part and just go, it is what it is. We are where we are. let's solve it. And that's hard because ego, right? I could have been in the NFL Hall of Fame. Dang it, Louie, why'd you hit me like that? I don't know. Any other questions or comments about this part?
I think there's also a step in here too where you have to evaluate, are these things I can even control?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times when we're faced with a situation we're trying to problem solve, we burn a lot of time and energy focused on trying to control something that you don't actually even have control over.
Yeah, I mean, look at relationships. It's like you can control you, right? And this could be a business relationship, right? But you can't control the other person, right? And so we spend so much time trying to solve other people or things that are outside of our control. And you're right, we have to be careful. It's like, that's why I go back to the things like, what can I control in my plan? So there it is. The reason why we go through this is because we want to create great outcomes. We want to have great lives. And we want to have less worrying about people contacting us at crazy times, doing crazy things.
Were you going to say something about having a third party look at it?
Oh, you mean like having somebody else come in?
That's non-emotionally involved.
Well, I mean that if you can find that person that can not, that can be a mediator in helping in that, yeah, but you really, both parties need to make sure that they're willing to not take things personally.
Well, I was actually talking about like with a hard money
Uh-huh.
loan. If you would have maybe asked somebody else for this is what I'm planning on doing, this is the problem, this is what I'm planning on doing, maybe they would have saw or seen that taking out a loan was not going to solve all 5 things.
Yeah.
So what you needed to concentrate on was paying your employees. And, with that, you only need this much of a loan. You don't need this much of a loan. Because we've got blind spots, right? And whether it's our ego or we're just so emotional in the moment that we can't, see what direction to turn. If you have somebody that you can talk to about it, and look at the situation without all that emotion going into it, they can sometimes see more clearly than you can.
Yeah, and
you were talking about that last night. I just want to make sure.
No, and I appreciate that, and that's kind of where I was going with it. Is if you can bring somebody else in that can help you, that isn't emotionally involved with it, that can help you see those blind spots. Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't do that. I mean, we sat down and we were like, there's a Band-Aid. Let's get that Band-Aid. Let's put it on. I mean, that was almost how we did it. And it was like, whew, And so, you want to avoid that. Interestingly, though, is I was in a peer group when all this stuff happened. That's when I went to them. I went to them and I said, hey, what do we do? And a lot of them were like, close your doors. And I'm like, okay, that's not going to happen because of the IRS. But that's when I went. But yeah, should have gone when I needed to make the decision. Not when not that it was bad to go at that point in time, but I think if I would have gone at that point in time, it would have been from a point of strength. And it's interesting because one of the guys in that group was talking to me after, like a year later, and he was like, man, I didn't tell you this, but I was like, man, how stupid. I was thinking, how stupid could you be to get yourself in that position? He goes, a year later, he had 75 employees and he was closing his doors. And he had a lot of equipment. They were liquidating his equipment to pay off his IRS debt and everything else. So always keep your eyes open so you can learn from other people. And don't ever say, that can never happen to me. Right? because it's only a matter of time before you say that, and it's like, yeah, that happened to me. Okay, but it's about creating great outcomes. Again, you got a plan. Then you got, avoiding the unnecessary. And great question. One of the things, and I talk about this in the book. I meant to talk about this, I think, in the avoiding at all costs. But it was this awareness that I had about these bid actors. You remember when I talk about bid actors in there? And so I don't have my phone. She's got it. I still think I have the guy's name in there, the hard money lender, and it's an all in uppercase. I don't know. I've just never taken it out. Because he was yelling at me all the time. He was like, everything he would do would be uppercase. Mr. Pierce. And I would just like, and it's weird because you're like, it's just uppercase. But it got to you. It's like, the guy's got to be serious. He put the shift lock on the cap and he's going at it. But it really played with me. And it wasn't until later that I realized, like one day I was scrolling through my phone and I see his name and I'm like, I haven't thought about that guy in months. I used to thought about that guy every freaking day. Every day that phone would ring, I'd be like, oh, right? Every time I'd get an email or I'd wake up, I'd be like, is it that guy? Then he was gone. We paid it off and he was gone. And I thought about that afterwards. I was like, I wasted so much of my energy on this individual. And he would say jump, and I would be like, how high? But I wasted so much time. And then he was gone. He was just a one, he was there for about 18 months or longer. He would disappear for 6 months, then he'd show up in a vengeance. But there were these others too, right? And so, I learned. And there was a point in time, and I mentioned it in the book, that we don't have a lot of problems with clients. We had a problem with an employee, which made us have a problem with the client. We had a difficult client that was never going to be satisfied, and we tried repeatedly to do it. And then we had one other one. I don't remember. And I don't remember anybody's names. I remember situations, but at the time I remember thinking to myself, that person is going to be gone in a little bit of time and I don't have to worry about them anymore. So I'm not going to spend myself up for somebody who's a bid actor that's only going to be here for a day or an hours or a week or a month. I'll give them the exact amount of energy that I need to make what they need completed, and that helps me. I'll give them that much energy, but I will not give them too much energy. And that was like this big epiphany.
What did you do with the client that you couldn't satisfy? Did you win him over somehow?
No, we basically ended up saying, he came to us and said, it's funny because it was like we did about 4 times the work we were supposed to do. And he came to us and was like, I think you did half of, I think your value was half of that. And I was just like, ACH is the money today. I said, if you can do that today, then we're done. So he did it. And I was like, I'm not going to win this because really it was either going to be he was going to pay that or he just wasn't going to pay anything. And it's funny because the guy who referred us, to this day, like profusely apologizes for recommending him that he contact us. He's like, I didn't know what kind of guy he was until after I recommended him. So, yeah, but it was just like, you only give so much time to those people. And I say that because a lot of it isn't just the time, it's the mental, all right? Everybody in here has had a situation where they're dealing with a client or a person, a mother-in-law, a parent, or whatever, that is like, oh my gosh, you are draining the life out of me.
Children, perhaps.
Children. So, and this, I came up with this like years ago. There are 2-minute people. There are an hour people, 4-hour people, a day people, maybe a week, lifetime. But I have family that are 2-minute family members. I'll give them 2 minutes because anything other than that is an emotional drain. And then if they can do, and it sounds horrible, but then if they can be good for 2 minutes, I'm like, oh, I'll give you a couple more minutes. And then I can grow. Huh?
Then they blow it.
Yeah, then they blow it. Actually, almost everybody that's a 2-minute person seems to say a 2-minute person forever. You're like, God, it's the longest 2 minutes of my life. But, and I say that because I always want to be respectful of people, but I also know that there's certain people that are just life sucks. And they'll do that. They're time thieves. And, you just try to avoid time thieves. Anything else? Any other comments, questions? I'm not saying concerns because I don't want to hear the concerns. Okay.